The next generation of superstars begins in Indy. Mel Kiper and Field Yates are breaking down the best outings from the NFL Scouting Combine that's coming up. Plus, as always, we respond to your questions, your takes, and your draft dreams live. It's the First Draft Podcast, and it starts right now. Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to First Draft. We are live with you twice every week leading up until we all combine or convene in Green Bay at the end of April. We're with you on Mondays and Thursday afternoons, live on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget on ESPN2 every single Monday. There they are, the legends, Mel Kiper and Field Yates. And as we will dive into the Combine, we didn't really get to do it on Monday because we were finishing up Mel's second mock draft. So I never got to ask my most important question, Field, for those of you who go to Indianapolis. How many orders of shrimp cocktail did you have while you were on the grounds there?
3 nights, 3 orders, Greeny. I made sure that my nasal passages were cleared. For those that are unfamiliar with what Greeny is referencing, of course, St. Elmo's legendary steakhouse in Indianapolis that also, for a restaurant in the Midwest, also has legendary shrimp cocktail sauce. This stuff will, it'll clear a headache, that's for sure. I actually felt great going into Indianapolis, but it kept me at that threshold throughout the entirety of my trip. I love that stuff. I'm a spicy food guy, so it's right up my alley.
Mel, the Maryland crab cake versus the spicy shrimp cocktail. If I'm asking you right now, I know one has more upside, one has greater reach and ran a faster 40. Which one are you taking?
The crab cake from the eastern shore of Maryland. I'll tell you what, with an orange crush and a little Smith Island cake as a little dessert there, Greeny. Nothing could go better. A little coleslaw as well. So now crab cakes, would be at the top of the list over anything else. Shrimp cocktail's good, but no, crab cakes in this region, in this Chesapeake Bay region. Now, don't go out of the area and expect to get a crab cake that's anywhere close to the 10 that this area provides. 12 months a year, okay? So you got to be careful. When it says Maryland crab cake, you got to make sure you're in the state of Maryland, especially down here on the eastern shore where there are none better than the crab cakes down here.
All right, so that was the first that I wanted to get into, the first evaluation that I thought we needed to make. Now let's get to the players who are in Indy as well. Last time, as I mentioned, we broke down Mel Kiper's Mock Draft 2.0, and I can mention that you can scan the QR code on your screen, access the entire First Draft YouTube playlist, so you will see all the decisions that Mel had there. And it's worth pointing out that mock draft came out before the Combine. Those decisions were made. So obviously there's been a lot of moving around. You can go to the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel and check out parts 1 and 2 of that. Let's do the Combine now, and let's start with studs and duds from this year's NFL Combine. Who were the biggest winners? Who were the biggest losers? Where did the stock move? And as we talk about the studs here, we'll begin with the best of the best, those who really caught the guy's attention. Field, we'll start with you on a very self-aggrandizing retweet that I saw that you made regarding Max Hairston's 40-yard dash. He had the fastest 40 at this draft or at this Combine. And Hayden Wicks posted, nobody more pumped than Field Yates stood on round 1 island. And Field, to make sure everyone saw that, I noticed that you reposted it, which is a good move. That's a pro move right there. It gives you plausible deniability. How significant was that 40 time in your mind, Field Yates?
Yeah, Greeny, first of all, I didn't know that I actually pressed retweet. I just saw the tweet. I hovered over it for a second. I didn't realize that I actually pressed send. My apologies for absolutely nothing in that regard. Max Hairston's been a favorite of First Draft for quite some time here. Mel also has love for Max. He was in Mel's first round, again, on that mock draft that came out before the 40 was conducted, before the entire Combine was conducted. But he was not a fast player. He was the fastest player at the entire Combine, Green. He ran a 4.28, did Max Hairston, one of the fastest times, not just this year, the fastest time this year, but also one of the fastest that you will see. Let's go back to 2023. Max Hairston led the SEC in interceptions. In one game against Vanderbilt, he had 2 pick sixes. He finds the football. He has outstanding ball skills. He is a super explosive player. And I'm not just talking about that speed, that 4.28 speed that is simply hard to find. On top of that, he's an explosive player that if he's going up against a bigger wide receiver, he has the ability to get vertical as well to cause pass breakups. They played against Texas this past year, did Kentucky, now in the SEC is Texas, and Max Hairston gave Quinn Ewers some real fits on throws down the field. So an explosive playmaker. He's only 183 pounds, Greeny, which is why he's not further up the board in round one. That being said, we have seen corners run close to this speed in a handful of occasions over the past half decade, maybe even a decade, oftentimes with the credentials of a player like Max Hairston, that equates to, with that speed, a first-round player. I will have him inside my first round for the next mock draft. He is number 25 on my soon-to-be-released updated big board.
All right, Mel, how about another stud from you? Who else opened your eyes at this combine?
Well, we have said from talking to our friends in the NFL that 40 time for Jahdae Barron was going to be so critical. And I remember way back early in his career when he was wearing number 23. He changed to number 7 at the end of his career. But when he was wearing number 23, he was popping. And I was getting calls on, watch that guy. He's going to end up being a high draft choice. And number 7 was all over the field. And number 7, everybody thought could run maybe 4.5, 4.48, ran 4.39. So when you break 4.4 and you're right in that area, when they were worrying whether you were a 4.5 guy, that's critical. Because when you're a hell of a player like he was, and you're versatile, and then you run a lot better than people thought, that cements you as the guy who's going to go somewhere. I had him going, as Field said, Max Hairston, I had going 29 to Washington. I had Barron going 30 to Buffalo. So they jump up a little bit from there. Possibly Green Bay sitting there, at 23? They could take a corner. Other teams obviously could. Pittsburgh, if they don't go wide receiver, could as well. So I think Barron, remember, Revel at East Carolina, Morrison at Notre Dame coming off injuries. Hairston was a little banged up this year. Will Johnson was banged up, right? You look at Barron out there doing great things and showing that versatility and then showing that speed that I think everybody had a little bit of a question about. So, and he's a great kid, incredible character. So Jahdae Barron, cornerback from Texas to me, now solidifies a first-round grade and could jump up maybe 8 to 10 spots from where I had him in mock 2.0.
See, that's where I think this stuff is really important before we go to the next one is certainly, at least until we get past NFL free agency, it's impossible to project who's going to take who and who's going to need what and all the rest of it. But it's where these players are starting to settle. And the combine is such an incredibly important piece of that puzzle. And with that thought in mind, there was another player from Texas Field who ran a ridiculous time last week.
Yeah, Max Hairston was the fastest player in the combine at 4.28, Greeny. Second fastest was Matthew Golden, a wide receiver who spent 1 year at Texas at 4.29. So he was right there in that exact same zip code as Max Hairston. And what I love about the combine, Greeny, in the case of Max Hairston and also Matthew Golden, is when the numbers match up with the tape. This guy can flat out go on tape when you watch him last season and actually in his prior 2 years at the University of Houston. Matthew Golden became the most important member of the Texas passing game last year for a group that entered last season with big expectations for Isaiah Bond, the transfer from Alabama to Texas. I don't know that there is any player who is better in his route stems amongst the wide receivers in this year's draft class. He can win at the line of scrimmage, he can win at the top of routes, and because he has that 4.29 speed, he can also win vertically down the field. That was not a huge strength of Quinn Ewers' game, just chucking the football deep down the field, and Isaiah Bond got a lot of those looks because he also has very good speed, but Matthew Golden was so explosive, and I thought he really showed up late in the season when he got opportunities. He had 100 or more yards in 2 games last season. Those 2 games were from the last game against Georgia in the regular season, and then another game in the playoff. He had 149 plus in 2 of his last 4 games. He was a clutch football player, caught pretty much everything thrown his way. Mel just mentioned the high football character for Jahdae Barron. I would say it applies, by the way, to both Max Hairston and certainly Matthew Golden as well. I said on the last show that I do think there's going to be some disagreement between evaluators, Matthew Golden versus Emeka Egbuka. I think they're in a similar territory. That being said, with my updated top 32 drops on Friday, Golden is going to have the edge over Egbuka, who did not run a 40 at the combine. I just don't think that Emeka Egbuka is quite as explosive as Matthew Golden, who, by the way, was 191 pounds with that 4.29 speed. That's a big guy running that fast.
Mel, I want you in on this as well. You've got Egbuka, you've got Matthew Golden, you've had Teteroa McMillan, who it feels like was at the beginning of this process was clearly the number 1 wide receiver, and that has adapted as well. Where, with this 40 time, where does Golden slot in amongst the top receivers in this class?
I think he's right in the mix to be. And then look at Travis Hunter as a corner wide receiver. Let's just take him out of the equation as the dual threat guy he is. Teteroa McMillan, what's his 40 time going to be? We don't know. Matthew Golden, we do know. Emeka Egbuka, they talk about an unofficial 4.39. If he runs into 4.4s, he's going to go high. But Matthew Golden, all you could say about him this year, good football player, okay? He had a couple concentration drops, that's it. He was money, and he was expected to be a good player. He was a great player. It was Isaiah Bond who was supposed to be the elite guy coming from Alabama. Matthew Golden came from the Houston Cougars. Matthew Golden became the go-to guy. And Matthew Golden, when everybody was talking about Isaiah Bond running a 4.2 something, right? 4.3, the 4.29 was Matthew Golden, not Isaiah Bond. So again, he's done it on the field. And that's the key here, guys. When everybody's thinking about the combine, it's not important what a guy does at the combine if he didn't produce, if you didn't like him as a player. If you didn't like him as a player, you're a nut. You're an idiot if you're going to move him way up because of a combine workout, right? Because if you can't get it done against college kids, how are you going to get it done against the NFL? Because you got that same talent. It didn't change. The combine talent was there in college. So if you weren't getting it done then, you're going to get it done against the best in the world? No, you're not. But if you were really good in college and you test well and you put it together, boom, you got yourself a player. And I think that's what we have. That's what we're trying to highlight today, both Field and myself. It's not just the workout warriors. They were just average players. We said, oh, wow, we got to go back to the tape. No, you don't have to go back to the tape on these guys, okay? These guys were great players. We don't need to do any over-analysis of these guys. The work's been done. And this kid is a good football player, and that's the bottom line. And that 40 puts him with Ibuka, puts him where Luther Burden in that mix, and he moved ahead of Burden, we thought. Burden did have a nice workout, but he moved ahead of Burden. Yep. So mid-first round, Pittsburgh would be, I think, we said professional for Ibuka. Matthew Golden's a professional. Pittsburgh's going to have to decide. Ibuka, Golden, over corner. That's a nice thing to have because they both may be staring the Steelers in the face when they pick, right? So it's going to be fun to see. But I think Matthew Golden, like I say, that 40 time, I think cemented him, as it did with Barron, two Texas kids. And ironically, Isaiah Bond, who was talking about what 40 he was going to run, didn't. And the guys you were kind of wondering what they were going to do, nailed it.
Yeah.
I will say this, and it's a topic for another podcast a little bit later in the process. By the time we get to the end of April, I think the conversation about the Steelers taking a quarterback could be a really interesting one to have, and we should do that as we continue here as well. Okay, but let's stick with the other players that really stood out to us. In Field, I'll give it to you to start it, but there were two Iowa State players who caught your eye.
Yeah, two wide receivers, by the way, a very Cyclone theme to this year's show. So I'll handle the smaller guy. Mel can take care of the bigger guy. It's Jaylin Noel, the wide receiver who is the smaller of the two, but do not mistake his small stature, relatively speaking, for a lack of explosiveness. He had an outstanding day, or outstanding weekend at the Combine, had some of the best scores in the jumps across the board. Very explosive guy who, by the way, in 2023, I talked about how I like the guys where the Combine numbers and workout aligns with the tape. I'll give you a guess on how many players had more 50-plus yard touchdown catches than Jaylin Noel back in 2023. The answer is 0. He had 7 of them. This guy is explosive on tape. He has a big play waiting to happen. They had this great resurgent season for Iowa State this past year, in large part because they've got these two wide receivers who get the job done in very different ways. I think Jaylin Noel has a real chance to be called somewhere in the first 75 picks of this upcoming draft. We've talked about the top of the wide receiver class just a minute ago. I'm not sure we believed throughout the process the depth was that great. It's starting to grow better and better and better, in part because of the efforts of guys like Jaylin Noel, who had a good season this past year and a great career for that Iowa State Cyclone program, Mel.
He did. And the other receiver Field, the big guy. And as you said, you had a guy in Jayden Higgins who transferred in from Eastern Kentucky. And he had done a good job at Eastern Kentucky, but now he steps up in competition, and you watch this kid, say, possession receiver. Okay, Alan Lazard came out of this Iowa State program. That would be a comp. Then you run like he did, 6'4" and change, 214 pounds, a 4.47, 39 vertical, 10.8 broad jump. And you got Matt Campbell raving about his work ethic. Rocco Beck raving about how this guy balls out all the time. And 5 or more receptions in 11 games, right? He had big game after big game in moments where he had to step up. A couple years ago against Texas, he had a big game. He did it in the bowl game. He did it in the Big 12 championship game. It doesn't matter. You go back to games that mattered the most, Jayden Higgins showed up in those games. I'll just rattle off a couple of them for you. I got them right here. Arizona State, Big 12 title game. Seven catches, 16.4 yard average. Utah, 9 catches, 2 average and a touchdown. 2023, Liberty Bowl against Memphis, 9 catches, 23.8 yard average. I said that Texas game in 2023, he had 7 catches for a 15 yard average. Outstanding hands, big kid, great target. and you run 4.47 at 6'4 1/8", 214 pounds, and at Eastern Kentucky in 2022 had 58 catches at 29 in 2021. So when you go from that level, you don't miss a beat coming to Iowa State. You got your head coach and your quarterback raving about not only you as a player, but you as a player who works hard to maximize that talent, both in practice and in workouts, anything off-season related, team guy, humble guy. This is a kid, Jayden Higgins, who I think when you get into late day 2, early day 3 field, I don't know what you're in. I'm thinking maybe 3rd, 4th round area for Jayden Higgins would be an area based on that 40 in conjunction with his production, I think is where he comes off the board.
The reason why I think there's a chance it could go higher, maybe even somewhere late round 2, is because as we examine this wide receiver class, and we'll do it again here, Tetairoa McMillan, 6'4" 1/8 of an inch, 219 pounds. He has excellent size. But the next players, however you want to stack them, the Matthew Goldens, the Emeka Ibuka, the Luther Burdens, players that go beyond that as well, whether it's Jaylin Noel or Jack Besh. What makes Jayden Higgins sort of unique is that size, right? There's not a bunch of guys that have 6'2" or plus frames at the wide receiver spot this year. It's him, it's Alec Ayo-Manor from Stanford. So there's a chance that a team is sitting there saying to themselves, yeah, we like fast, shifty slot receivers, but we really need a big perimeter winner like Jayden Higgins. Wouldn't surprise me if he finds his way into round 2. Both of these guys are just awesome football players.
Mel, we're doing studs and duds. Let's do one more stud. Let's get an offensive lineman in here. It's been a lot of skill, a lot of DBs and wide receivers. Give me an old lineman somewhere.
How about a first-year starter at Georgia, and then Jared Wilson in field? I'm sure we touched on him at some point since August, right, or September when we started doing the first draft podcast this year. But Jared Wilson, athletically, are you kidding me? You saw it. You saw what he was able to do, getting that second level and the movement, the agility, the quickness of Jared Wilson at 6'3", 310. 32 vertical. His vertical was almost as good as Malachi Starks, guys. It's the outstanding safety from Georgia. You know, you talk about a guy 4'8", 4'9" for Jared Wilson. That is flying. Did you see Membou's reaction when a fellow SEC offensive lineman runs that 40? These guys were in awe of a guy who can run that well and was a one-year starter. This is a guy under the radar coming out of high school, waits his time behind Cedric Van Pangranger, right? And all of a sudden, he's a one-year guy. Yeah, but he had been there. He had been learning. He had been developing and improving. And to be this athletic, he's the best center in this draft. Now, hey, Gray Zabel, North Dakota State, may end up being a center. Guard, played everywhere along the offensive line, center at the Senior Bowl practices. Okay, Jared Wilson, at worst right now, when you do what he did and you are a good, solid player who's going to get better and better when you work out some things and you're coached up in the NFL by some of these great offensive line coaches we have, he's second round. And I see the Bears at 39 and 41. They need multiple offensive linemen already. I think they added a guard in free agency. Okay, they could be a team. What happens with Green Bay's center? What happens with Atlanta's center? There's going to be some teams looking for guys that are going to anchor that offensive line. And if you take Zabel and you put him at guard as a versatile guard center, the number one pure center is Jared Wilson. Yep. And Field, I can't believe, I'd be very, very surprised if when we get into round 3 of day 2, he hasn't already been taken. And it may even be early to mid-second round.
Yeah, I agree. As I mentioned, my top 32 comes out on Friday, but part of that exercise is figuring out the guys that just missed the cut and might fit into your top 50. Jared Wilson, I think, is going to hover right around the border of that top 50 player. The only limitation here would be that he is a pure center. He is a center only, unless you're a Tyler Linderbaum, who, of course, went to Mel's Ravens 23rd overall a few years ago. It's hard for guys to creep much higher than, let's call it, pick 40 or so at just one position.
All right, and so rounding out, as we're doing studs and duds, I want to do one little, I want to combine two players because they sort of combine both elements of the stud and the dud. So let's talk, first of all, we're going to talk about Armand Membou, who had this extraordinary performance, ran this incredibly fast 40-yard dash, the second fastest among all the offensive linemen. And we have a post here from Michael Rodnick as we're looking at some tape on Armand Membou and his performance. He ran 4.91, which was outstanding. But the tweet that we have from Michael Rodnick is he pushing for Will Campbell's spot in the draft? And I want to put those two thoughts together because Membou has this incredible performance at the Combine. And Field, I spent the entire weekend reading about how long Will Campbell's arms aren't.
Yeah.
And I know that this podcast is really designed for the hardcore draft fan, so I get that they understand the significance of that. But the arm length on Will Campbell combined with the speed of Armand Membou, what does that all add up to, Field?
Yeah, Greeny, the best part about the combine is when you check in at 6'6" and 319 pounds, you're still considered a dwarf at your position because, by the way, Will Campbell is 6'6" and 319 pounds. Let's start here with Armand Membou, and then I'll kind of tie it into Will in a second. Membou, I think, helped his cause about as much as any player, perhaps not named Tyler Warren, during this past season. Membou had a terrific year for Missouri. He's a 20-year-old kid. By the way, he's a Kansas City kid who ends up at Missouri. He's been entrenched on the right side of that Missouri offensive line for multiple seasons. He is nasty. He is a very, very mean person on the football field. I can't speak to his off-field disposition, but I imagine that he's got some real edge to him because he plays with it on the field. He's extremely powerful as well. And, of course, he is highly athletic, as was on display throughout the combine, not just through that 4.91, but also his vertical leap and his broad jump and just the overall ability that we saw during the workout on the field as well. He's continued to ascend. And as far as the physical measurements are concerned, while he's not perfect height by the NFL standards, this guy is pretty darn close to clean across the board. That introduces an interesting debate, which to me is, can he leapfrog Will Campbell? All right, Will Campbell has been, as Mel and I have been talking about, and Grady, we talked about this for 6 months now. This guy has been one of the most can't-miss prospects in this year's draft. He came in with 32 5/8 of an inch arm. Many NFL teams want him to be 34 inches, so we're talking about nearly an inch and a half between the ideal measurement and where Will Campbell checked in. Here's where I have landed, and I think reasonable minds can disagree. You got to plant your flag on one side of the debate or the other. You either got to say to yourself, Will Campbell can be the outlier because of the incredible feat, the terrific pass blocking production, 3 years of experience, the incredible character of Will Campbell. This guy is as clean as it gets as far as prospects go in a lot of ways this year. Or you got to say, hey, he's got shorter arms, and I think he plays guard. He'll be a damn good guard too. I land on left tackle island. I still believe that if I'm drafting Will Campbell really high, and I would still use a top 5 pick on Will Campbell, I'm trying him at left tackle, and if it doesn't work, I know the floor is being an excellent guard. I still have him ahead of Armand Membou in my grades, but I know, and Mel might disagree, there are people who say you simply can't be that much of an outlier at left tackle. He is now a guard based off those measurements.
Yeah, you got to take a stance. Is it Kent Island or is it Gilligan's Island? You know, I don't know. I don't know what island we're be talking about here. Is it going to be an uninhabited island?
Left tackle island.
I don't know what island we're talking about. I just know that Bill Polian was part of this podcast right now. Bill Polian would say you don't draft outliers, and I've said that over and over again. So you got to be consistent. If you're trying to say, okay, this guy's going to be different than other guys, then you're trying to draft that outlier and hoping for the best, and it may work out. Field, it may well be, and you got a little security there inside right tackle. You got other options for offensive linemen. Some guys, everybody said Tony Mandarich was a bust. He was a bust at tackle. He was a pretty good guard for a period of years with the Colts. So it's always that security blanket. If somebody fails at the position, you hope, and you're drafting him as a left tackle. You're not drafting him as a guard right tackle. He's being drafted as a left tackle. That's where he played. So if you're going to take him for New England or somewhere in that 10 range, you're drafting him as a left tackle. But you're hoping that despite the short arms, he can be somebody that can be against these great pass rushers in the NFL, a Pro Bowl caliber player. If you don't think he can be that guy, not just an outlier who makes it as a starter, an outlier who makes as a starter and as a Pro Bowl caliber player, that's what you have to believe if you're taking Will Campbell in the top 10 of this draft, okay? To me, that's what you have to believe. I had him at 10 on the big board going into the combine when I wasn't sure about the arm length. So I'm thinking, no. When I'm picking at 10 or inside around 10, 12, I want a player on my board that's 5, 6, 7. Not a guy at 10 or 11, 12. So I think that's where it has to come down to. Your rankings board, and they always said that. Carl Peterson said it protects you against reaching. You rank these players, you rate them for a reason. When you put them up on that board, where's Will Campbell in relationship to where you're picking?
Yeah.
And I would probably say right now, I don't think you can really define or feel good about a mock right now, Phil, and I'll ask you, if you had to say, where does Will Campbell, forget rating, just what number does he, for even team, what number of the first round does he come off the board?
I'm still saying 5. Like, that's where he is on my big board that comes out on Friday. Like, I'm holding my ground here. Again, you have to pick a side. You have to pick an island. If you don't want to do islands, you have to pick a side. You want to pick a side, we'll pick a side, we'll pick an island, whatever you want. You have to pick a side on this player. I just think that there's so much tape of this guy, and I get it, the SEC is not the NFL. I'm not naive to that fact. But for 3 years, this guy protected Jayden Daniels, who had the best rookie season from a quarterback probably ever, and then Garrett Nussmeier, who could be a first-round pick next year. How often was the length a problem? It was so rarely a problem that I'm just a little bit less concerned about it than some would be. If he was a 6'4", 305-pounder who also had short arms, I might feel differently. He's 6'6", he's 319 pounds. The arms are a little short. I'm less bothered by it than some. And so I would still feel comfortable using a very high selection on Will Campbell. I think if 2 quarterbacks go early, the Patriots probably just take one of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter at 4, but I would consider it if only one quarterback goes ahead of them. I would consider Will Campbell there. I think the Jaguars at pick 5 should consider Will Campbell as well. I am a believer in this player.
Mel, what number same question to you. What number, give me the projection right now with the arm length. What number do you see Will Campbell coming off the board?
Don't know, because I haven't talked to my friends in the NFL about it yet. Until I do, and I had people saying, let's wait and see on this. Let's wait and see where he is in terms of arm length. I'm going to be making more calls. I have a next mock 3.0 coming out in a few weeks. When that comes out, it'll be based on calls you make. And Field, you're going to be doing your stuff as well, checking and rating. On rating, I said 10. I had him at 10 before, because I thought his arms would be about where they were. I put it at 33, not 34. I was hoping it would be 33. Was it 33, Field? Just under for 33, right?
32 and 5/8 of an inch. Yep.
Right. So I put 33. I said at least be 33.
Yeah.
Forget 34, because you knew it wasn't going to be that, but at least be 33. It wasn't. So if I was at 10 before, I'm going to be at 10 to 15 now, depending upon how other guys move. So for me, it would be a stretch at 4. I said that a couple weeks ago for New England, but they need a left tackle. If they feel the way you do, Field, then they'll take him. But again, I think he's going to be one of those players who's going to be really an interesting test case 4 to 5 years down the road to see where he is in relationship to these other offensive tackles that came out this year.
It's just funny to think sometimes, like in this exercise that we're doing. I understand why we have thresholds. And I abide by them in so many cases. But like Josh Simmons, who's going to go in the first round, and Ariante Ursary, who could go late first, I think more second personally, but like, they're at 33 inches, right? So like if you're watching on the YouTube channel right now and you can see my fingers, we're talking about like this much difference in arm length for these guys, and that could be the differentiator between a guy going 5th and maybe 15th. Again, I'm comfortable with the amount of exposure that I've had to Will Campbell, and I've asked the questions like Mel has, and I've gotten some mixed reviews. There are some people that are saying, don't care, I'm sticking by my Will Campbell evaluation, and there are others that have said, to Mel's point, I can't pull the trigger that high, but I'm going to land more on the side of somewhere between 4th and 7th overall for Will Campbell, as opposed to more like 10th or 15th.
All right, so that was an aside, but I think it was worth going there because I think he's an extremely interesting player, and that will be an incredibly important decision that gets made somewhere in the top 10 picks, we assume, in the NFL draft. Okay, so let's flip it the other way. Let's go to the duds. Field, who would be the first name that jumps to your mind as someone who had a really rough time in Indianapolis?
Yeah, the 2 top tight ends did not work out, Greeny, which meant no Tyler Warren and no Colson Loveland, who, by the way, is recovering from shoulder surgery right now. It opened the door for some others to make a leap. And Harold Fannin Jr., who had this unbelievable season, record-setting season for Bowling Green, most catches, I feels like in forever for a tight end, 117 to be clear, 1,555 receiving yards, both best in the entire FBS. Ran a 4.73. Was not the athlete that some people were hoping for him to be. Yes, on tape, it does look pretty good at times athletically. It even looked good in games against top-tier competition, which was a game most notably against Texas A&M. But the testing numbers were what they were. The 4.73 and the workout during the gauntlet was very uneven. For those that don't know the gauntlet drill, it's where the pass catchers run the 53 yards, which are the width of the football field, and they're catching passes, about 6 in total, right, left, just looked uneven for Harold Fannin. I just think athletically does not stack up with some of the guys that are going to be the next, let's call it 3 to 6 tight ends taken after the 2 guys at the very top. The Elijah Arroyos, obviously the Mason Taylors, Gunnar Helms, some others are going to be in that mix. Maybe Harold Fannin, if you consider him a tight end, is more like the 6th or 7th off the board, as opposed to some people hoped he could get all the way up to tight end 3, which I always thought was a bit rich, at least based off my own evaluation.
Mel, how about some duds from you?
I'm not as much into the duds as Field is. I mean, he must have loved milk duds when he was growing. Remember the milk duds?
They get stuck in your teeth, though.
Yeah. He heard duds. He said, I'm going to go with 3 or 4 duds. I don't like to use the word duds because they're pretty good players, but they just maybe didn't do as well as you expected. They weren't as big as you thought, as fast as you thought. I don't like the word dud because these guys are football players and they were productive. So I don't want to be as critical as young Fielding. You love milk duds growing up and said, let's call it a fun segment of duds, studs and duds. Maybe Joe G came up with that term. But I'll go Tez Johnson because Tez, he was listed even in Oregon's media guide as 165 pounds, right? I checked. He was listed at 165. Yep. What do you weigh in at, Field? 154, 155?
Right? Yeah, 154.
Right. So you're talking about 10, 11 pounds less than he was listed at. Check back. Field, you were skeptical of Xavier Worthy. He was, 165 pounds. Yep. Everybody was taking shots. Xavier Worthy can't get it done at 165. Well, he did at Kansas City get it done. You're talking about 10, 11 pounds lighter than that, okay? The Tank Dells, the Devontae Smiths are bigger, and he's 5'10", and he didn't run the 4.35, 4.40. Field ran, in the 4.5 range, right? So
4.51.
You're talking about a 4.51. So, again, you're talking about a small, diminutive receiver who also didn't have the blistering 40. We know he's quick. We know he has punt return ability. We know how productive he was at Oregon. I had him as my 9th, 10th best receiver in this draft going into the combine. I thought he'd run in the low 4.4s, maybe high 4.3s. He didn't. He ran 4.5, 4.51. He wasn't 165. He was 154. So what do? Again, how many 155-pound receivers are in the NFL? And you can say, well, it's only 10 pounds. Phil said, it's only this, 10 pounds. At some point, there's got to be a cutoff, okay, to when you say, it's just too small or the speed doesn't match up. And remember, these are AOGs we're working against in college, right? These aren't the best in the world. So, again, that's why when you say college level, the National Football League, big difference. So production, excellent at Oregon. It was excellent at Troy before he got to Oregon, right? I mean, he had 56 catches in 2022 at Troy, averaged over 15 yards a catch. Punt returner, averaged over 10 yards a return. But the size and the lack of blistering speed takes him from my 9th or 10th receiver field in a not great receiver group this year, and moves him a little bit down from that. So I won't push him way down. I'm not going to use the word dud. I'll just say it was less. It was disappointing to what we thought he would be in terms of weight and speed.
Mel, the first year I worked with you, the first year I did the draft, we had a receiver named Tutu Atwell who has had, a pretty decent career in the end. I don't know exactly how one quantifies what his production has been relative to where he got drafted. That's immediately the conversation I think back to when we talk about this player.
He was a second-round pick. Yeah,
he wound up going in the second round. Field, so, by the way, I was never a fan of milk duds. They get stuck to your teeth. It's impossible.
I loved them.
It ruins the movie. No, you're sitting there and it is stuck to your teeth. That caramel is like, it becomes like concrete. So
they taste really good, Greeny. They taste really good.
They do.
No, not a fan of the milk duds.
And you want to be alone when you're eating milk duds, right? You don't want to be on that first date, right? You don't want to be on that blind date having milk duds, right?
I greatly prefer the peanut M&M to the milk dud if you're going to have one of these one-at-a-time candies. But that's...
You know what I do, Greeny? I'll just give you a little insight.
Yeah.
I never eat when I'm in the crowds. If I go to a dinner party, I don't eat. I go to a party, I don't eat. I don't eat when I go. I would eat before I go. So I don't have to eat anything. I'll drink, but I will not drink. I'll drink my bottle of water or whatever, maybe an orange crush. But I'm not eating I never eat any food at any gatherings. And when I eat at gatherings, I'll usually take it in another room. But I never eat, even Thanksgiving, you got to eat. But when there's public gatherings or anything, there's a lot of food, I won't eat a thing.
This is the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. I go to these gatherings I've been fasting for weeks, and I eat everything available to me.
There was a place, the Crease in Towson. It was a great place to go when you were coming up in your 20s, right? And they would have this big party in June. And my friends would say, I'm not. It was get there around 9, 10 at night, right? They'd say, I'm not eating. It's I don't wait and eat at the crease tonight at the party. I'm gonna just eat all night. You know what I would do? I make sure I ate enough throughout the day that I didn't have to eat a thing at night. So during the crease party in Towson, Maryland, in the what was this? I'm thinking here in the mid 80s, late 80s, right? That's where I was going.
Yeah.
Pretty much every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. The crease in Towson. Never ate a thing there.
We are built different, my friend.
I feel like this is something we're going to have to build an entire podcast episode around, to be completely honest with you. Let's do one more player here, Field. How about Kaleb Johnson?
Yeah, Kaleb Johnson from Iowa was a great player, Greeny. He really is. But the fact of the matter is, in this loaded running back class, the difference between a 4.57 40, what he ran, and maybe a 4.47 40, which player like Quinshon Judkins, I believe was actually 4.48, could be how a guy leapfrogs others, right? I thought there was a chance that Kaleb Johnson could be a top 40 draft pick. Just don't know if 4.57, despite the fact that he would be a hand-in-glove fit for a zone scheme offense that could run some of the same concepts that he thrived in during his time at Iowa, I just don't know if he goes in that top 40 selections, maybe more towards the back end of round 2 or even the early portion of round 3. Some of the other running backs that were at the combine that performed, including Omarion Hampton, he was terrific. We saw Ashton Jeanty only do the measurements. He doesn't have to worry about it, but Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins amongst the names that could be ahead of Kaleb Johnson now on some teams' boards. I know that it's just one number. That being said, there's not a ton of running backs who are high-level players in the NFL that are unquestioned starters that also ran a 4.57 40. Really solid prospect, but I do think in this class that's going to impact his standing.
Okay, so our Orange Crushers are still to come, but before we get to those, this is one of my favorite features. It's called I Got a Guy. All through these pre-draft processes, you're always going to find a guy that you fall in love with. I got a guy, he's got a guy, you got a guy. Mel, give me a guy. Who's a guy that you are willing to use Field's earlier terminology that you're willing to be on an island for?
I'll take Savion Williams. I'll tell you, Wildcat quarterback, last 6 games, 310 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, averaged 6.3 a carry, threw some passes, but caught 60 passes on the year with 6 touchdowns. Former high school quarterback his senior year, kickoff returner early on, had some big returns for the Horned Frogs. Stanford early in the year, he had 11 catches. He was doing a great job as a receiver, and he was becoming more natural catching the ball, knowing when to body catch, when to extend those hands and use that catch radius, right? Savion Williams, Field, you have the numbers there, about 6'4", 222, 223.
Yep.
Was listed at 225. We were saying, I thought he had a good workout.
Yeah.
He ran 4.49.
4.49.
4.49.
Yep.
Gifted athlete, work ethic, versatile kid, keeps getting better and better. He eliminated some of those costly drops, became more consistent and more reliable. I got to believe, Field, second round's a possibility, no later than the third.
I think you have the right range there for Savion Williams. My only hope, my desire is he goes to an offensive coordinator who knows what he's doing, because when you have these gadget guys, they have to have a very specific plan for that player. My guy is one where apparently the apple does not fall far from the tree, because you guys may be familiar with 2 Pro Football Hall of Famers, Jason Taylor and Zach Thomas. They happen to be now brothers-in-law. And Mason Taylor, the son of Jason Taylor, was awesome during the on-field workout at the combine. This guy's huge. He's 250 pounds. He blocks. He holds up very well in that phase of the game. He's one of the most natural hands catchers in this entire class. He didn't run. I don't think he would have been a 4.51 guy, but he's fast enough to me. He makes contested catches, which, by the way, you just saw one right there. He's powerful. He's got really good size. I think he's going to be terrific in the red zone as well. I think Mason Taylor will be the 3rd tight end drafted by the time we get to April 20, probably 25th. That would be day 2 of the NFL draft. It's him and Elijah Arroyo. I think that Arroyo has higher upside because of the athletic ceiling that he brings to the table, that nearly 17 yards per catch average. But Mason Taylor is just a darn good football player who had to wait his turn because, of course, LSU had those incredible receivers prior to this past season with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. lighting the NFL on fire as rookies. Mason Taylor was really solid this past season. I think he is going to be a quarterback's best friend right away wherever he gets drafted.
I will also just add quickly that as a lifelong fan of alliteration, anyone who watches or listens to any of my shows,
yes,
I love the fact that Jason Taylor named his son Mason. I think Jason and Mason is just an absolutely outstanding way. Mel, if you had a son, you should have named him Dell. Field, I don't know if that was ever an option for you.
Yeah, Yield.
My wife Stacy is a huge fan of Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
She wanted to name our son Mick when he was born, and I just thought Mike and Mick, there was something about that felt like the opposite, like they sort of clashed with each other. I think you have to take that stuff into account when you choose these names. Okay, speaking of names, it is time for the Orange Crushers of the Week, which are the players you are not talking about, you are not thinking about, but you should be, and you will be now that Mel and Field tell you who they are. Mel, we start with you.
I'll tell you what, a great Orange Crush. Go to Foxy's over at St. Michael's Marina, best in the world over there at Foxy's and St. Michael's Marina. But I got an Orange Crusher who was a wide receiver in high school, wide receiver early on, great special teams player, Darien Porter. This is the Iowa State Cyclone theme. We love Matt Campbell and the job he's done at Iowa State. Darien Porter, I had him as a ninth cornerback going into the combine. We'll get to those numbers in a minute, but he made his mark on special teams before he got the corner this past year. 4 career block punts, was outstanding in that aspect of being a football player, developing from wide receiver, tackling, doing things there. Goes out this year, intercepts 3 passes, 2 against Iowa, does the job. Combine, I got these numbers. Here we go. And we talk about long athletic corners, right? Who are ascending players. Tariq Woolen was that guy. We thought Tariq Woolen Field back in the day would be, what, a second-round pick? What, are you going to 5th round?
Yep.
He got lost in the shuffle. Somehow he dropped Greeny with the 5th round, was it?
Yep, 5th round.
That sounds right, yeah.
Yep, that's what it was.
Darien Porter, I'm not going to project around here because I'm not sure where he's going to go. Opinions were all over the place.
Yeah.
I got to think day 2. I'm ranking him as a day 2 player. I'll talk to my friends in the NFL, but after this combine, I'm going to give you these numbers. This is a guy that had 3 interceptions this year, 2 in the game against Iowa, 1 against Texas Tech, blocked the punt and blocked the field goal as well. 6'3", 195 pounds. Okay? Long arms. 4'3", 440, 36 and a half vertical, 10-11 broad jump. That's impressive. On the heels of a year where he started to get better and better. After, like I say, made his mark on special teams, former wide receiver. Field, again, I'll defer to you. I got to believe he doesn't get out of day 2.
I think he is the day 2 guy, and I think that Za Frazier from UTSA is the day 3 guy. They kind of fit into this category. These big, long, these cornerbacks who look, they've got these, these go-go gadget arms and make plays on the football down the field. Maybe it's round 4. I don't think it's any lower than round 4, though, for Darien Porter. High pedigree player, like just a respected kid, obviously, with this special teams background. So a nice pick there by Kiper. And I'll give you my Orange Crusher of the week here. And let's talk about Bhayshul Tuten. Another running back. I know we've given you guys 25, might as well make it 26. If you're a fan of the great Boston College football program, I apologize because Bhayshul Tuten had a monster game against BC last year that was enough to catch your attention. 260-plus yards. This guy can fly. Hit a 4.3240 at the combine. That was fastest amongst the running backs, the 4th fastest amongst all players that were in Indianapolis. Not a huge guy by any stretch, but he's got some power to him, that low center of gravity, so he's able to withstand some contact. And when he gets a step on people, it's over. This guy is just a big play waiting to happen. He's a day 3 pick almost assuredly because there is so much depth in this year's class. But as your second runner in, I think this guy is going to make a mark for a team as they change of pace back. That speed is undeniable.
All right, so
what's the deal with the Hokies, guys? A lot of Hokies, Greeny. A lot of Hokies that are ascending a little bit. And I'll tell you, I am definitely rooting for Tuten.
These programs. Mel likes the alliteration as well.
Yeah.
All right, that is all the time we have for this edition of First Draft. Do not forget a couple of important reminders. Scan the QR code, like and subscribe to the podcast. Tune in every Monday and Thursday for full NFL draft analysis, and send us your questions on Twitter X using the hashtag FirstDraft for a chance to be featured on the program. I'll remind you again, parts 1 and 2 of Mel's Mock Draft 2.0 are available now on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts, so you can check those out. In the meantime, get yourself some Milk Duds, get yourself an Orange Crush, and we will see you again on Monday. For Field and for Mel, I am Greeny. We hope you've enjoyed.
See you all later.